Hello everybody and welcome back to Storytime with Soul Guru. Today we continue our journey with The Sands of Destiny, Chapter 2, Into the Depths by Keith Fowler. The ground crumbled beneath them, plunging Ethan, Lila, Sammy, Maya, Tommy and Professor Winter into the darkness below. They tumbled through the narrow passages, their screams mingled with the sounds of falling debris, until they crashed onto a hard stone floor. Torches scattered around them flickered to life, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with ancient artifacts and eerie shadows dancing in the dim light. Ethan groaned and pushed himself up from the ground. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, his voice strained with concern. Lila nodded, checking her backpack to ensure their supplies were intact. "I think so," she replied, her voice echoed in the chamber. "That was quite a fall." Tommy, Ethan's younger brother, sat up, shaking dust from his hair. "I'm fine, but that was terrifying." Professor Winter stood up, dusting herself off. "We have fallen deeper into the temple's catacombs," she observed, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "This chamber must have remained hidden for centuries." Maya Rodriguez, their tech-savvy friend, adjusted her glasses, looking around the chamber with wide eyes. "These artifacts, they look like they belong in a museum," she muttered, her fingers itching to document everything. Sammy let out a nervous laugh. "Well, at least we're closer to the treasure now, right?" Ethan retrieved the map, its surface glowing faintly in the torchlight. "According to the clues," he said, tracing a finger over the ancient parchment, "we need to proceed deeper into the catacombs. The treasure shouldn't be too far away now." They navigated curiously through the chamber, mindful of ancient traps and pitfalls that might still be lurking in the shadows. The air was thick with dust and the scent of ages past. Silence broke only by their footsteps and the occasional drip of water echoing from unseen recesses. As they ventured deeper, they encountered a series of cryptic symbols etched into the walls, a language that spoke of ancient guardians and the Pharaoh's protection. Ethan and Professor Winter worked together to decipher the glyphs, their mind racing to unlock the secrets they held. "The symbols are a warning," Professor Winter said gravely, her fingers tracing the faded carvings. "The Pharaoh's tomb must be near. We must proceed with caution." They passed through chambers filled with relics of a forgotten time, gilded statues, crumbling sarcophagus, and ornate tapestry that told stories of gods and kings. Each step brought them closer to their goal. The map guided their path through the labyrinth of corridors. Maya was snapping photos of everything, her eyes wide with fascination. "I can't believe we're walking through history like this," she whispered, awestruck. The walls seemed to close in around them as they entered a narrow corridor, lined with alcoves containing cryptic symbols and artifacts. The torchlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the stone wall. Ethan studied the map intensely, searching for the next clue. "I think we should go this way," Lila suggested, pointing to a passage that seemed darker than the rest. Ethan nodded in agreement. "Let's proceed." They moved cautiously through the passage, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The air grew colder, and Ethan could feel the weight of centuries pressing down upon them. They rounded a corner and entered a chamber bathed in a faint, ethereal light. At the centre of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested an ancient tablet, covered in intricate hieroglyphs. Ethan approached it cautiously, his heart racing with excitement and trepidation. He glanced at Professor Winter for guidance, her expression serious and thoughtful as she studied the tablet. "This tablet contains the next clue," she said finally, her voice low. "It appears to be a riddle, a test of wit and knowledge." Ethan leaned closer, squinting to decipher the ancient script. The riddle spoke of 3 trials that must be overcome to unlock the path to the Pharaoh's treasure. "The first trial," Professor Winter, her voice echoing through the chamber, "lies in the Chamber of Echoes, where sound is both friend and foe." Ethan frowned, pondering the cryptic message. Chamber of Echoes? Could it be referring to the room we just left? Lila nodded thoughtfully. It makes sense. The echoes were strange there, almost like they were guiding us. Tommy looked up at his older brother with eyes wide. Is it dangerous, Ethan? Ethan smiled reassuringly. It'll be okay, Tommy. We'll figure it out. Sammy cracked a nervous grin. Well, I'm ready for whatever trials come our way. Bring on the echoes. They retraced their steps back to the chamber they had passed through, listening carefully to the sounds around them. The torchlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls as they made their way back to the Chamber of Echoes. Let's go slow, Professor Winter suggested in a calming voice as they re-entered the Chamber of Echoes. The air thickened with anticipation as they closed their eyes, focusing on the sound around them. Their footsteps, the drips of water, the rustle of clothes, the echoes bounced off the walls, creating a symphony of reverberation that seemed to pulse with life. Listen, Professor Winter instructed, her voice barely a whisper. The echoes hold the key. They stood in silence, attuning their senses to the chamber's acoustics. Gradually, patterns emerged from the cacophony, a rhythm that hinted at a hidden passage, a melody that whispered of a secret long buried. Ethan's heart quickened as he followed the echoes, leading them deeper into the chamber. They approached a section of a wall where the sounds seemed to converge, revealing a hidden alcove concealed behind a tapestry depicting the ancient Pharaoh's coronation. Here! Ethan exclaimed, pulling aside the tapestry to reveal a narrow passageway. Beyond the passageway lay a dark corridor, leading deeper into the catacombs. Ethan glanced at his companions, a mixture of determination and awe reflected in his eyes. We're one step closer, Professor Winter said quietly, her voice filled with admiration for the ancient civilization that had crafted such an intricate trial. Maya nodded, her mind already racing with thoughts of documenting their discovery. I can't believe we found this. With cautious steps, they ventured into the unknown and the depths of the catacomb. Their journey unfolded one riddle, one trial at a time, as they drew nearer to the fabled treasure of the pharaohs. The group proceeded down the dark corridor, their footsteps echoing softly against the ancient stone wall. The air grew colder as they descended further into the depths of the catacomb, a sense of anticipation hanging heavy around them. Ethan kept the map close, occasionally checking it against a torchlight to ensure they stayed on course. Sammy's nerves began to show. Are we sure about this? He whispered, glancing nervously at the shadows dancing on the wall. What if there are more traps? Professor Winter placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We've come this far, she said calmly. We must trust in the clues and each other. Tommy clung to Ethan's side, his small frame trembling. I don't like the dark, he admitted softly. Lila knelt down beside him, offering a comforting smile. Hey, you're the bravest one here, Tommy. Don't worry, we've got your back. They continued through the labyrinth of corridors, passing through chambers adorned with more artifacts and hieroglyphs. They told tales of conquest and divine favour. Ethan felt a sense of awe and reverence for the ancient civilization that had once thrived here, their legacy preserved in stone and gold. After what seemed like ages of walking, they reached a fork in the path. Ethan consulted the map, his brow furrowing in concentration. According to the map, he said slowly, we should take the left passage. Without hesitation, they followed Ethan's lead, their footsteps echoing down the narrow passage. The wall seemed to close in around them. The silence broke only by faint sounds of their breathing and the distant dripping of water. As they walked further, the torches along the corridors flickered ominously. Ethan glanced back, a chill running down his spine. Did you hear that? He whispered, his voice barely audible over the echoes. Lila nodded, her sense on high alert. It sounded like footsteps. Professor Winter raised her torch higher, casting a flickering light down the corridor. Stay close, she instructed, her voice steady despite the growing unease. "We are not alone down here." Sammy gulped audibly, his eyes darting nervously between the shadows. "Maybe we should turn back," he suggested, his voice tinged with fear. Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, we've come too far," he said. Determination hardened his voice. "We must press on." With renewed resolve, they continued down the passage, the air thick with tension. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every echo a whisper of danger. Suddenly they entered a chamber, unlike any they had seen before. The walls were adorned with glowing crystals that illuminated the room with their otherworldly light. At the centre stood a stone pedestal, similar to the one they had encountered earlier, but this time with 3 ancient tablets resting upon it. "This is it," Professor Winter breathed, her eyes widening in awe. "The final trials." Professor Winter approached the tablet cautiously, her eyes scanning the intricate inscriptions. "These tablets," she murmured, "each one representing a trial mentioned in the riddle." Ethan joined her, studying the tablets intently. "The first trial was the Chamber of Echoes," he recalled. "What are the other trials?" "The second trial," Professor Winter explained, pointing to the second tablet, "involves a test of strength and agility in the Chamber of Shadows." Maya leaned in, fascinated by the carvings. "That sounds like we're going to be dodging some ancient traps, just like in the movies, but way more real," she commented, her voice betraying a hint of excitement despite the looming danger. Lila stepping forward, her gaze fixed on the third tablet. "And the third trial," she said softly, "is a trial of knowledge and wisdom in the Chamber of Enlightenment." Tommy, clutching Ethan's arm tightly, whispered, "Are we going to have to be smart too?" His wide eyes flickered from Ethan to Professor. Ethan chuckled softly, ruffling Tommy's hair. "We're all going to have to use our brains for that one, but don't worry, we got this." Sammy swallowed hard, eyeing the tablets with apprehension. "So we have to complete these trials to reach the treasure?" Ethan nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "According to the riddle, these trials will lead us to the Pharaoh's treasure," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "We just need to figure out how to overcome them." As they contemplated their next step, a low rumbling echoed through the chambers, followed by the sound of shifting stone. The walls trembled and a section of the chamber began to collapse, blocking their path back the way they came. "We're trapped!" Sammy exclaimed, panic creeping into his voice. Maya grabbed Tommy's hand, pulling him closer to her. "We need to move, like now!" Professor Winter remained calm, her eyes scanning the chamber for an exit. "There must be another way out," she said, her voice steady. "We just need to find it." Ethan turned to the left passage they had taken earlier, now sealed off by the fallen debris. "What about that passage?" he suggested, pointing to a smaller opening in the chamber wall. Without hesitation they rushed towards the opening, squeezing through just as the chamber behind them crumbled even further. They emerged into another corridor, smaller and more claustrophobic than before. "This must be the way to the Chamber of Shadows," Lila observed, peering into the darkness ahead. As they ventured deeper into the corridor, the air grew colder and a sense of foreboding settled over them. The torchlight flickered weakly, casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the wall like spectres. They reached a large door adorned with elaborate carvings depicting warriors in battle. Ethan pushed against the heavy stone door, straining with all his effort until it finally creaked open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Inside the chamber was shrouded in darkness, save for a single beam of moonlight that filtered through a high jagged crack, casting an eerie glow on the stone floor. The light barely illuminated a narrow path, leading across a deep, seamless, bottomless chasm that split the chamber into 3. The middle path they were on was treacherous, lined with narrow, uneven ledges that zigzagged down the middle, of the chamber like fragile threads. Swinging pendulums, ancient and rusted, hung ominously from the ceiling, slicing through the air with menacing swooshes, their sharp edges glittering in the pale light. "This is a chamber of shadows," Professor Winter whispered, her voice barely audible as it echoed off the cavernous walls. Her eyes were wide with apprehension. "To proceed, we must navigate this path with extreme care. One wrong step and..." Her voice trailed off, but the implications were clear. Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest, his eyes fixed on the perilous path ahead. The darkness seemed alive, pulsing with a marvellous energy that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. "Let's take it slow," he advised, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through his vein. "Watch your footing and keep your eyes on the path. We can do this." As they moved cautiously onto the first ledge, the stone was cold and unforgiving beneath their feet. The chasm below yawned ominously, a black void that seemed to swallow the light, offering no hint of what lay beneath. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creaking of the ancient pendulums and the soft rustle of their movement. Tommy clung to Ethan, eyes wide in terror. "I don't like this, Ethan," he whispered, his small hand trembling. "It'll be okay, Tommy. Just stay close and keep your eyes on me," Ethan reassured him, though his pulse was racing. The first challenge came quickly. A pendulum larger than the others swung down with terrifying speed, slicing through the air just inches from their faces. Ethan barely had time to react, throwing himself flat against the floor as the blade whooshed past. Its cold wind brushed his cheek. "Stay low," he shouted, his voice tight with fear. "Time your movements with the swing, or I'll take your head off." One by one they crouched and moved, timing their steps with the pendulum's rhythm. The tension was palatable. Every muscle in their bodies coiled, ready to spring. The air was thick with the scent of dust and rust, mingling with the cold sweat that trickled down their faces. Halfway across the path, it began to narrow even further, crumbling at the edges, forcing them to inch forward with their backs pressed against each other. The sound of falling rocks echoed in the darkness, swallowed by the abyss below. Leah's breath hitched as she nearly lost her footing. The stone beneath her feet gave way. Ethan grabbed her arm just in time, pulling her back to safety. "Careful," he warned, his voice strained. "This ledge is unstable." Maya was right behind them, Lila, her eyes darting between the pendulums and the ledge. "We're in a pressure cooker. One wrong move and we're toast," she muttered. Just as they thought they were making progress, the shadows themselves seemed to come alive. Dark tendrils like living smoke curled up from the chasm, snaking around their legs, threatening to pull them into the void. Sammy cried out in a panic as the shadows tightened around his ankles, dragging him backwards. "Help! I'm being pulled in!" Tommy gasped in terror as the shadowy tendrils curled up towards his feet. "They're going to get us," he whimpered, grabbing Ethan's arm. Leah, eyes wide with fear, reached out, gripping Sammy's hand with all her strength. "Hold on, Sammy, don't let go." She tugged with all her might, her muscles straining as the shadows resisted, pulling him closer to the edge. Ethan quickly swung his torch down, the flames licking at the dark tendrils. The shadows recoiled, hissing, as they retreated back into the chasm, releasing their hold on Sammy. Breathing heavily, Sammy clung to Lila, his face pale. I don't think I can do this," he admitted, his voice trembling, the fear palpable in his eyes. "You have to," Lila replied, her voice firm but gentle. She squeezed his hand reassuringly. "You're not alone. We're in this together, and we're not leaving anyone behind." With renewed determination they pressed on, but the chamber seemed to sense their resolve, and threw more challenges their way. As they reached a particular narrow ledge, a section of the wall suddenly gave way, sending rocks tumbling into the chasm. Ethan had just enough time to push Lila forward as the ledge crumbled beneath them, forcing him to leap to the next foothold, barely catching the edge with his fingertips. "Ethan!" Lila screamed, dropping to her knees to help him. She grabbed his wrist, her knuckles white, as she struggled to pull him up. Maya quickly moved to help, grabbing Ethan's other arm and pulling with all her might. The strain was intense, the jagged rocks digging into their skins, but with a final desperate effort, they hauled him back onto solid ground. They paused, panting, their bodies trembling from the close call. "That was too close," Ethan gasped, his voice hoarse. "We have to keep moving, the path might not hold for long." As they reached the end of the chamber, a final obstacle awaited them, a series of swinging blades, more numerous and faster than any they had encountered before, blocking the last stretch of the path. The blades were so close that there were barely any room to pass between them. The air was thick, the sound of metal slicing through the air, a deadly rhythm that promised a swift end for any misstep. Ethan studied the pattern carefully, his mind racing to calculate the timing. "We have to go one at a time," he decided, his voice filled with the gravity of the situation. "I'll go first. When I make it across, Lila, you follow, then Professor, then Maya, and Tommy and Sam last." Taking a deep breath, Ethan waited for the right moment, then darted forward, moving with precision and speed. He twisted and ducked, the blades narrowly missing him as he maneuvered through the deadly gauntlet. Reaching the other side, he turned back, waving for Lila to follow. She hesitated for a split second, fear gripping her, but then she steadied herself and ran. The blades seemed to come from every direction, a blur of steel and shadows, but she moved swiftly, her small frame allowing her to squeeze through the narrow gaps. She stumbled on the last stretch, nearly losing her balance, but managed to dive forward just as the final blade swung past her. Professor Winter followed her movements, slower but just as precise, her years of experience guiding her through the danger. She made it across with only a small cut on her arm where the blade had grazed her. Maya went next. Her athleticism helped her move quickly and nimbly through the blades. She leapt and dodged, her movement fluid and agile, landing safely beside Ethan with a triumphant grin. Tommy was last and clinging to Sammy. As they stood at the edge, both boys trembling with fear. I can't, Tommy," whispered Froze in terror. "You can do it, Tommy," Ethan shouted, his voice firm. "You've made it this far. We're right here, waiting for you." With a shaky breath, Tommy took a step forward, pulling Sammy with him. Together they ran through the blades, dodging and ducking as a sharp metal whizzed past them. Tommy stumbled, but Sammy yanked him forward as they dove across the last blade, rolling to safety on the other side. They collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily, their bodies trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. The path had been brutal, testing their courage, agility and resolve, but they had made it. The far side of the chamber opened into a small alcove, the wall adorned with ancient symbols carved into the stone, glowing faintly in the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of age and secrets, long buried. Ethan pushed himself up, helping the others to their feet. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with relief and pride. "We made it across." Professor Winter nodded, her eyes scanning the symbols. "But the journey is far from over," she reminded them. "This was only the second trial. The Chamber of Enlightenment waits, and it may be the most challenging of them all." Ethan glanced at the map, his resolve hardened. "Then let's not waste any time," he said, leading them into the alcove, where the next chapter of their perilous journey awaited. Well guys, this is the end of chapter 2. Join Ethan and the gang next time as they enter the Chamber of Enlightenment, where bonds are bound to be deepened.